Patch 6.2 is introducing not just Durin, but also a lot of major buffs to some old Mondstadt characters, making some of them much better supports, and turning others into legitimately good DPS. This naturally gives Durin a ton of different team options, so in today's video, since there's so much to cover for Durin, we'll be taking a look at specifically Durin teams where he's played alongside one of the newly buffed DPS, those being Venti, Razor, and Klee. Quick disclaimer before we start. Do just keep in mind that I calc at a different standard than most other theory crafters, so the numbers you see in this video will likely be higher than what you have seen from others. Alright, so if you aren't familiar with how Durin's kit works yet, I recommend checking out my first impressions video where I gave a full summary on it. But in short, Durin is a burst-based pyro sub-DPS that has different modes you can choose to use, one where he does AoE damage and provides Res Shred, and another where he has large single-target multipliers and buffs his own Vape/Melt damage. The buffs both of these forms provide are increased by 75% when paired with another Magus character, Magus being the term for all buffed characters. All of their new abilities require 2 Magus characters on the team, and Durin is the best Magus character, so he's going to be on all of these teams for the most part. So starting with Venti, his buffs are as follows. While this burst is active, if an active character triggers Swirl, they gain 50 damage bonus to a Nemo and the Swirled element, and this also gives Venti's burst a multiplicative buff of 35%. Hitting enemies with Venti's normal attacks will then extend his burst by 1 second each, up to 2 seconds total extension, so his burst can now last up to 10 seconds. Venti will also gain a Nemo infusion on his normal attacks, with a 2.5 times multiplier on the original physical multipliers. That is a massive multiplier. With the amount of normal attacks Venti seems to be able to do in 10 seconds, that being 8 and 3s with dash cancels, all of his multipliers combined in a rotation come out to over 10,000 attack scaling, which for context, that is just straight up some of the highest scaling in the entire game, behind only Skirk and 6 Cannon can each. And so, the best way to use Venti now is as a traditional Anemo hyper carry in a team of Farazan, Bennett, and Durin. Farazan and Bennett will hyperbuff Venti, while Durin will do good sub-DPS damage while also providing 35% Res Shred plus Pyro Resonance. As we can see, Venti does legitimately good damage here of just over 2 million, but keep in mind this is assuming his burst is actually hitting the enemy reliably, which oftentimes in single target or against non-groupable enemies, Venti's burst will get positioned in a way to where it's not hitting the enemy, or the enemy might even just move away from it. Venti's burst is doing over 400,000 damage here, so missing it will be a big loss, so just keep that in mind. But overall, this team is legitimately strong, reaching over 130,000 damage, which, if you saw my tier list video, puts him within the range of current top 10 DPS units. If you don't have a C6 Farazan, your next best option is, crazy as it sounds, Albedo. He has also gotten massive buffs to his kit as a Magus character, which we'll go into detail on in another video, but basically, Albedo here is providing Venti with up to 42 damage bonus and doing decent sub-DPS damage of his own. Losing Farazan is a considerable DPS loss as you'd expect, but the overall team DPS is still surprisingly high. If you don't have Albedo, C6 Fischl is the next best option. With her Magus buff, she's providing a 55% attack buff to Venti, while also doing her own sub-DPS damage. Something else neat you can do with Venti is, the 50 damage bonus buff he will apply, that goes to any on-fielder that triggers Swirl while his burst is active, not just Venti himself, so this makes him a better support and sub-DPS for Anemo DPS. As an example, you can do Wanderer, Bennett, Durin, Venti. This is equal DPS using C6 Farazan. You get less buffing from Venti, but he does a lot more personal damage than Farazan, and the rotation time is no longer gated by Farazan's cooldown, so we can do 17-second rotations instead of 19, thus allowing the overall team DPS to be equal despite not having Farazan's buffing. But do keep in mind this is assuming Venti's burst is reliably hitting, which, as we mentioned, sometimes it's just not reliable. If it isn't, then Farazan is still better. If you are comfortable playing without sustain, which can actually be realistic for skilled players since Wanderer can move while attacking and gets free dodges, then Venti could also be used alongside Farazan in place of Bennett, and this also comes out to about the same DPS. But as you'll notice, it's considerably more DPS to use Venti in his own hyper carry team. This is because he gets the advantage of being able to use all 3 of Farazan, Durin, and Bennett, whereas for Wanderer to use Durin and get the Magus buffs, he has to replace Farazan or Bennett. On top of that, as mentioned earlier, Venti just has some of the highest attack multipliers in the entire game now, reaching just over 10,000 attack multipliers in a rotation, compared to Wanderer at 7.5k with 30% attack speed from his weapons, C1 and DPC. So paired with Durin, Venti is indeed now unironically the strongest Anemo DPS, at least at the moment, stronger than even Chaska if we count her. With that in mind, you'll also want to know how to build Venti in this role. As a DPS, most of Venti's damage will be coming from his normal attacks, so the two sets you can make good use out of are Echoes and DPC. These two sets should be very similar in damage, but Echoes can miss procs if you have high ping, while DPC will require you to perform a charged attack, which can be annoying, so use whichever of the two you prefer. And for weapons, Venti is getting a new signature, which will be his best option here. If you don't have it, just use your best stat stick 5-star bow. If you don't have one of those, then his best 4-star weapon is going to be Rust. And for Venti's constellations, these have been buffed as well. The one you're going to see one is a bit confusing, but basically every quarter second, his normal attacks will gain 2 coordinated attacks, which do 20% of the normal attacks multiplier. Where this becomes confusing is, if Venti's burst absorbs an element, it says the arrows will deal the corresponding type of elemental damage, and it sounds like this changes the damage from Anemo to the absorbed element rather than dealing both elements, which is weird, because that's obviously going to be way less damage than doing Anemo. Assuming that's how it works, this is around an 8% damage increase. Then his C2 is still providing 24% Anemo Shred, and when Venti uses his skill, it's now essentially tripling the multiplier of that skill. And the skill already had a 500% multiplier, so now it's about 1500, which is pretty insane considering he gets it 3 times, so that's around a huge 31% increase. And then his C6 is still 20% Rare Shred, which is kinda crazy because between Durin, Farazan, and Venti C6 and C2, you're gonna have over 100% Anemo Shred. But in addition to that, Venti will also gain 100% crit damage against enemies hit by his burst. So this is pretty good 36% increase. Just keep in mind all of those buffs from the C6 do require the burst to actually hit the enemy. Now moving on from Venti, there's also Razor. The attacks from Razor's Wolf Spirit of his burst, they now gain an additional 70% attack multiplier, and Razor is now restoring even more energy to himself, which will usually come out to about 14 more energy refund per rotation. Then his C6 also got a massive buff. Now, whenever he gains Electro Signals, he will gain all 3 at the same time, so he'll pretty much always have his full 60% energy recharge buff. When he consumes them, which he does just by casting his burst, he then gains 10% crit rate and 50% crit damage, so these buffs together result in Razor now being capable of tremendously higher damage than before. The best way to use Razor is going to be in an overload team with Durin, Chevres, and Yansan. Yansan might seem like a strange pick, but Razor's optimal combo shown in the rotation on screen involves him performing dash cancels after every skill cast and every N3, so he's dashing frequently enough to stay at Yansan's max attack buff for nearly the entire time. Note that in this rotation, we are doing 5 N3 combos on Razor, which comes out to about 15 seconds of field time. Similar to Sino, he can stay on field for considerably longer than that, but it would be a DPS loss due to extending the rotation with expired support abilities, thus it's better to stay as close to a 20-second rotation as possible. Also, even though the supports on this team are meant for electro damage, Razor's physical damage is still getting buffed well by all the attack buffs this team has. That said, if you don't have a constellated Yansan, Fischl can be used instead. As mentioned with Venti, Fischl is providing 45% attack buff to both herself and the on-fielder. Then this team, she'll be getting buffed by Chevres for good sub-DPS as well, but Yansan is better if you have her constellated. If you wanted to try Razor without Durin, you can use Bennett. If C6, Bennett will infuse Razor's normal attacks with Pyro, so they are now fully benefiting from all the team buffs. Razor will also get a lot of overload since he's dealing Pyro damage via normal attacks and Electro via burst and skill, plus his self-Electro aura will react with the self-Pyro from Bennett, causing overload damage from that as well. Overall, this is less DPS than using Durin though, but it's still pretty good. Now for building Razor in this team, his best weapon is going to be 1000 Blazing Suns, followed by an R5 Serpent Spine and Beacon of the Reed Sea. His best 4-star weapon, if you don't buy the Battle Pass, will be the Fontaine Craftable Tidal Shadow. And then for artifacts, Razor's best set is going to be 4-piece Pale Flame. The physical damage bonus doesn't help his electro damage, but his physical attacks still deal good damage, and the 36% attack from the set is doing good for his electro damage at the same time anyway. If you don't have Pale Flame, Emblem isn't too far behind. Even without building any energy recharge at all from substats, Razor is pretty much always going to be at 180% ER, since Emblem gives 20% and he buffs his own by 60%, so his burst will be going a bit over 40 damage bonus from this set. If you choose to use Bennett instead of Durin, then Thundering Fury becomes his best set, followed by Gilded Dreams and Emblem. And then main stats, You might think Attack Goblet would be best since Razor's damage is split between Physical and Electro, but he already gets a ton of attack buffs in his team, so Electro is about 7% better. But if you don't have a good Electro Goblet, using Attack until you get one is fine. Attack Circlet is also in the same position, but if you aren't using a crit weapon, I would not advise going without a crit Circlet. Lastly for Razor, since 4-star constellations can be hard to get if you don't have good luck, let's take a look at how important it is to have those constellations. As we can see, from C0 to C6, Razor's damage is increased by about 60%, with his C6 alone being half of that, so having him C6 is going to be very important. If you can get him to at least C4, he should still be performed decently well, since C4 is defense shred, so it buffs the whole team's damage, but you will feel a big increase going from C4 to C6 once you get it. So that wraps up Razor. Overall, he's now looking to be very strong for a 4-star DPS, with DPS levels that would put him in the bottom of the above average tier from my tier list. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. As an Electro Overload DPS, Razor is now looking to be the 3rd strongest, only slightly behind C0 Clarand. So if you have or are able to get C6 Razor and you want an Electro Overload DPS but don't want to pull for a 5-star DPS, Razor is looking to be able to serve you very well now. Alright, let's talk about Klee now. While Klee's burst is active, her normal attack chain will not reset, so you can do things like perform an N1, then cast a skill. Your next normal attack will be N2 instead of N1. And when she performs her N3, she can consume one of her explosive spark stacks to instantly perform a charged attack without needing to manually input it. Your charged attack now has a 50% multiplicative buff as well. Klee's C1 also received a buff, which I will be calcing her with since you can get it for free, but it's a very simple buff giving her a 60% attack buff. As for Klee's teams, keep in mind that figuring out and optimizing her best combo is very difficult without being able to playtest her with the changes, so any calcs you see from her before any early access or post-release footage could likely either be optimized better or could possibly even be over-assumed, so just take all Klee calcs for now, including mine, with a grain of salt. But going with the combo I thought of, Klee's new best team seems like it will be double Geo with Shalonen, Albedo, and Durin. Shalonen will be buffing everyone with her Res Shred and Scroll, while Albedo is dealing very high sub DPS damage, providing Geo Resonance, and buffing himself, Klee, and Durin with up to 42 damage bonus, so these 3 are all doing good damage together, resulting in a pretty strong team. The next best team should be Burning with Klee, Emily, Bennett, and Durin. Emily has extremely high multiplies for a sub DPS, but in most teams she doesn't benefit from many buffs. Here, Durin will be providing 35% Res Shred to both Pyro and Dendro, while also holding Deep Root since Emily does more damage than him, so this allows her to use Unfinished Reverie for much more damage, especially if you have her signature weapon as well. You can see she's reaching nearly 1 million damage per rotation at C0, so having sub DPS damage that high alongside Klee's on-field damage is very nice. Klee also doesn't have a good artifact set if she's not paired with Farina to use Hunter, but using her in Burning allows her to use Unfinished Reverie instead, so that's pretty good. Overload is looking similar in power level, with much more personal damage on Klee. The team is Klee, Chevros, Fischl, and Durin. And I did also try using Farina and Shalonen, playing Klee the way she currently plays, using Farina to allow her to use Hunter plus either Cashflow or Tomb as her weapon, and having Farina forward vaporize off all the Pyro application. This is currently calculating a lot worse than the other options. And that covers pretty much just about everything for Durin's synergy with Venti, Razor, and Klee. To recap, Venti now has some of the highest attack scaling multipliers in the entire game, behind only the likes of Skirk and 6 Cannon Kenichi, so Venti is now looking to be the strongest Anemo DPS, even ahead of Chaska. Razor is now looking to be pretty strong for a 4-star DPS, only slightly behind Clarand as an Electro Overload DPS. And Klee, again, we have to take our calcs with a grain of salt until our combos are properly optimized in early access or post-release, but it does seem like she should have new teams that are a lot stronger than where she's at right now. So Durin and these changes overall were tremendously impactful to the power level and relevance of these old characters. There are still 4 more Magus characters to cover Durin's synergy with, which will be in its own video, as we would be here all day if this was all in one video. But if you found this video helpful at all, consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to leave a comment letting me know your thoughts. You can also join my Discord and communicate with me and my community directly. Thanks, goodbye.